simple act of kindness in a small diner, a waitress giving a toy airplane to a lonely, disabled boy, sets off a chain of events that changes all their lives forever. The diner was a small, cozy place tucked between two tall buildings on a busy city street. It wasn't fancy, but it had character-checkered floors, red vinyl booths, the comforting aroma of coffee and freshly baked pies that made everyone feel at home. It was the kind of place where people waved at the waitress by name, and the regulars argued over who made the best pancakes in town. Behind the counter, a young woman moved quickly, her apron slightly stained, her hair tied back in a loose bun. She carried plates and mugs with practiced ease, but her smile never faltered. To anyone watching, she seemed like someone who had it all together. Yet beneath the surface, she worried constantly about bills, rent, and the little things that kept piling up in her life. Every day, she worked tirelessly. Not for recognition, but simply to keep going. To keep moving forward, and to find joy wherever she could. It was a Wednesday, just past noon, and the diner was buzzing with the usual lunchtime crowd. Families chatted over burgers, students hunched over laptops with half-eaten sandwiches beside them, and a few office workers nibbled their lunches while scrolling through their phones. The waitress weaved in and out of the tables with remarkable grace, balancing trays laden with steaming plates, refilling coffee cups, and answering questions about the menu with patience. She never rushed, but she never faltered either. There was a kindness about her, a warmth that people noticed. Even if they didn't know her story, just as she was delivering a plate of eggs and bacon to a small table in the corner, the door opened, letting in a gust of cold wind from the street. She glanced up instinctively and saw a man step inside, holding the hand of a young boy. The man was tall, with an air of quiet confidence, and he wore a simple jacket over an expensive-looking shirt. It was clear he was used to getting attention, but he didn't demand it here. His eyes were calm but alert, scanning the diner as though he wanted to see everything without anyone noticing him. The boy beside him looked about 7 years old, with bright eyes and a small frame, slightly hunched as if he carried a weight bigger than his size. There was something delicate about him, something that made anyone watching want to protect him without knowing why. The waitress watched from across the room as the man helped the boy into a booth by the window. She noticed the careful way he adjusted the chair for his son, making sure he was comfortable. It wasn't overbearing. It was just a gentle attention, the kind a parent gives when they know their child faces challenges the world may not always understand. The boy's legs didn't reach the floor completely, and he had a small brace on one of his arms. She realized immediately that this child was different, in ways the world might see as limitations. But the way he looked around the diner, curious, observant, almost showed a spirit that was far from limited. The man slid into the booth opposite, son, and placed a hand on the table. His gaze softened as he watched the boy take in the surroundings. There was a small model airplane on the counter nearby, a simple toy left from a previous customer's child. The boy's eyes flicked to it, and a small smile appeared on his face. The kind of smile that made the whole room pause without anyone realizing it. He reached out instinctively, but the toy was just out of reach. The waitress, seeing this, felt a small tug at her heart. She had worked here long enough to notice these small moments, the subtle excitement in a child's eyes, the little gestures of longing, the fleeting joys that adults sometimes miss. She approached the booth with her notepad in hand, ready to take their order. "Hi there," she said gently, kneeling slightly so she was at the boy's eye level. "What can I get for you today?" The boy looked at her shyly and mumbled his order, a little unsure of himself. His father repeated it for him, but the waitress's attention lingered on the boy for a moment longer. She noticed the way he kept glancing at the toy airplane, the way his small hands twitched slightly as if wanting to reach out, but unsure if he could. Without thinking too much, she smiled and said, "You know, that plane up there looks like it wants to fly? Maybe it needs a little friend." The boy's eyes widened, a mix of surprise and delight. The father watched quietly, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips, curious about what she might do next. The waitress walked over to the counter, picked up the toy airplane, and brought it back to the boy. She handed it to him carefully, her hands steady and gentle, making sure it landed safely in his small grasp. "Here you go," she said softly. "A little gift just for you." The boy's face lit up in a way that made everyone else in the diner seem to fade away. He hugged the toy tightly, his eyes sparkling with joy. "Thank you," he said, his voice a little higher than usual, full of excitement. His father watched in awe, not because it was a grand gesture, but because it was something he had hoped the world could give his son: kindness, attention, and recognition that he was just as worthy of joy as anyone else. The waitress returned to her duties, her steps a little lighter, her heart a little fuller. For her, it was just a small thing, a simple act of kindness, but she didn't realize how much it meant to someone watching so closely. The father's eyes lingered on her for a moment longer. He was used to seeing wealth, power, and influence, but what he saw here was different. He saw genuine care, empathy, and a willingness to give without expecting anything in return. It struck him deeply. As the lunch rush continued, he kept glancing at the waitress, noticing how she treated every customer with the same patience and warmth, how she never rushed anyone, how she moved with a quiet confidence that came not from privilege, but from resilience. He realized that she lived a life full of challenges, yet she had this rare ability to make others feel important, to bring joy into moments that could have been ordinary. The boy played quietly with his airplane, and for a while, the diner seemed to move in slow motion around him. The laughter of other customers, the clatter of dishes, and the hum of conversation became a soft background to a simple, magical scene. A father watching his son smile like he had never smiled before, and a young woman unknowingly giving a gift that went far beyond the toy itself. The father knew something in that moment had shifted. He didn't yet understand how or why, but he felt a deep sense of gratitude, a feeling that the universe had placed this young woman in their path for a reason. He watched as she moved from table to table, always kind, always patient, always seeing the people around her not as problems, not as transactions, but as individuals with feelings, dreams, and small desires that mattered. By the time their lunch was over, the boy had created a small imaginary world with his toy airplane, narrating adventures in a quiet voice that made his father smile from ear to ear. The waitress cleared their plates, exchanging a few cheerful words, and the father realized that this was a rare kind of human connection expected, unplanned and yet profoundly meaningful. As they left the diner, the father held the door open for the waitress, and their eyes met for a brief moment. There was a silent understanding, a recognition that something had passed between them, something beyond words. It was a simple Wednesday, an ordinary day in a small diner. Yet it contained a moment that would change more than one life forever. The boy held the small toy airplane tightly in his hands, his fingers wrapped around it as if it were the most precious thing in the world. His eyes sparkled with excitement, and for the first time that day, he seemed completely at ease. The waitress watched him from a few steps away, smiling softly. She had not expected much from the small gesture, only a fleeting moment of happiness for the child, but the effect was far greater than she imagined. The boy's laughter, a clear, bright sound, filled the small diner and made the father's chest tighten with emotion. There was something about that laughter, pure, unfiltered, joyous, that reminded him of what life could be. Even amid challenges and hardships, the boy's father sat quietly across from him, observing without interfering. He was used to shielding his son from disappointment, from the stares and the whispers that often came with his disability. But here, in this unassuming diner, he saw a small miracle unfold. A simple toy had created a moment of pure happiness, and it had come from someone who didn't know them, didn't have to care, and yet did. The father's eyes followed the waitress as she moved back to the counter, carrying plates and cups, her movements effortless and graceful. He could see the way she noticed every detail, how she adjusted the chair of a customer who was slouching, how she refilled a cup of coffee before anyone had to ask. It was as if kindness was not something she had to think about. It was simply a part of who she was. The boy began to spin the airplane in the air, making little swooping motions, imagining it soaring over mountains and rivers, performing daring stunts in an invisible sky. His voice, small but full of imagination, narrated the adventures as he played. "Look, it's flying over the city. Oh no, It almost crashed. But it's okay. It's safe now. The father chuckled softly, his heart swelling with pride and relief. He had seen his son struggle to find joy in public spaces, had seen him face the pitying eyes of strangers, and yet here he was, completely alive, completely himself. The waitress, noticing how engaged the boy was, moved closer once more. She crouched slightly, speaking to him in a quiet, encouraging voice. "Wow, that plane is amazing. Where is it flying now?" The boy's eyes lit up as he explained his imaginary journey, his hands moving to guide the plane's path in the air. She listened intently, nodding, smiling, asking questions that made him feel like his story mattered. The father watched, amazed at how icily she connected with his son. He realized that her attention was genuine. She wasn't being polite out of obligation or for show. She was fully present in the moment, giving his son a rare gift, someone who truly saw him as the lunch crowd began to thin. The boy's excitement did not fade. He continued to play, narrating new adventures, making the airplane perform loops and dives across the booth. The father noticed something he had not seen before, a sense of independence in his son's joy. He wasn't waiting for approval or for help. He was imagining, creating, and thriving in his own little world. And the waitress, by acknowledging his imagination, had validated it. She had given him permission to be himself, and in doing so, she had given him something much greater than a toy. She had given him recognition, respect, and freedom. The father's mind wandered as he watched this interaction. He thought about his own life, about the world of wealth and influence he occupied, and how often it overlooked these small human moments. He had donated to charities, supported causes, and yet the impact of a single spontaneous act of kindness in a small diner seemed more profound than all of it. He realized that true generosity was not about money or status. It was about noticing, caring, and acting in a way that made a difference in someone's life, however small it might seem. Meanwhile, the waitress moved to another table, attending to a family of 4. She refilled drinks, took new orders, and offered cheerful words to the children. But even as she did this, her eyes occasionally flicked back to the boy in the airplane. She could see the way he grinned every time the plane soared through the air, the way he mimicked its sounds, and the way his imagination transformed the diner into a vast, limitless sky. She felt a warmth inside her chest, a quiet satisfaction that came from making someone else's day a little brighter. She had grown up understanding the importance of small joys. Her own childhood had been filled with little moments of wonder she clung to when life got difficult, and now she was passing that forward. The boy's father leaned forward, resting his chin in his hands. He felt a strange mixture of admiration, gratitude, and curiosity. He wanted to know more about this woman who had impacted his son's day so profoundly. Who was she? What was her story? How could someone show such genuine care without expecting anything in return? He noticed the subtle lines of fatigue on her face, the way her hands moved quickly and efficiently, but with tenderness. And he sensed a life of hard work, resilience, and perhaps struggle. And yet, despite it all, she radiated a positivity that seemed to lift everyone around her. As the waitress cleared the last of the boy's plate, she leaned down and whispered to him, "Keep dreaming, okay? Your plane can go anywhere you want it to." The boy nodded solemnly as if taking her words to heart and held the toy closer. The father felt a lump in his throat. He realized that what had happened here was more than a chance encounter. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest gestures, the kind words, the brief attention, the simple act of noticing could have a lasting impact. The diner's noise continued around them, but it no longer seemed ordinary. The clatter of dishes, the hum of conversations, and the hiss of the coffee machine all became part of the background to this extraordinary little scene. Father witnessing his son's happiness. A child discovering joy in a simple toy, and a young woman unknowingly creating a memory that would stay with them forever. He knew he would never forget this moment, and he felt an urge, deep inside. To make sure her kindness did not go unnoticed, the boy continued to play, narrating new adventures, imagining daring rescues, daring flights, and incredible stunts. Each time he threw the airplane into the air, the father caught himself smiling. laughing quietly to himself at the sheer delight his son was experiencing. He had spent so much of his life shielding his son from disappointment, from the harsh realities of the world. And yet here, in a quiet corner of a small diner, he saw a freedom that was rare and beautiful. The waitress moved back behind the counter, her steps light, her expression calm, yet focused. She began preparing drinks for a new customer, but she remained aware of the boy, keeping a quiet watch over him. She did not intervene unnecessarily, but she was there if he needed her. Her presence was gentle, consistent, and reassuring. The father could not help but notice it, the way her attention was given freely, without judgment or expectation. He had never encountered someone like her before. Someone whose generosity of spirit was so natural and instinctive. Finally, as their meal came to an end, the boy hugged the toy airplane one last time and looked at his father. "Thank you for bringing me here," he said softly. The father smiled, his eyes glistening. He understood that the real gift was not just the toy, but the experience itself, the joy, the attention, and the kindness that had made his son feel seen and valued. The waitress brought the bill and accepted payment with a friendly nod. She offered the boy a final smile and a wave, and he returned it enthusiastically, his heart still racing with excitement. The father watched as she moved to help another customer, her smile never fading, her kindness never wavering. He realized then that moments like this were rare, but they could change lives in ways money or power never could. As they left the diner, the father held the door for the waitress. Their eyes met briefly, and in that fleeting glance, a silent understanding passed between them. He didn't know how or why, but he felt certain that this was the beginning of something meaningful, something that would ripple far beyond this small Wednesday afternoon. And for the boy, the simple toy airplane had opened up a world of imagination, joy and hope that would stay with him for years to come. The father could not stop thinking about the young waitress as he drove home with his son that afternoon. He kept replaying the moments in the diner over and over in his mind, the way she had noticed his son, the way she had handed over the toy airplane with such quiet kindness, and the way she had treated every customer with patience and care. It was remarkable, and he could not shake the feeling that their encounter had been more than coincidence. He realized that in all his years of wealth and influence, he had rarely witnessed a simple act of generosity that felt so genuine, so heartfelt and so transformative. The boy sat quietly in the back seat, gripping the toy airplane tightly. He was exhausted from the excitement, but his face still glowed with joy. The father glanced at him through the rearview mirror and smiled. "You really enjoyed today, didn't you?" he asked softly. The boy nodded enthusiastically, holding up the airplane as if it were a treasure. "I did. She gave me the plane, Daddy. She's so nice." The father chuckled, feeling a warmth that he had not felt in a long time. It was more than just pride in his son. It was a profound sense of gratitude for the kindness of a stranger who had, in one simple gesture, made a lasting impression on both of them. Later that evening, after putting his son to bed, the father found himself unable to concentrate on the work that normally filled his nights. He sat alone in his study, the soft light of his desk lamp casting shadows across the room. He thought about the waitress in her life, which he knew must be filled with challenges he could only imagine. From her attentive manner, her hard work, and the quiet resilience in her eyes, he sensed that she was someone who had struggled to make ends meet, someone who worked tirelessly yet remained optimistic. He wanted to know more about her, to understand the person who had brought such unexpected joy into his son's life. Over the next few days, he began to discreetly gather information. He returned to the diner during quieter hours, paying attention to the schedule, the way she interacted with coworkers, and the stories that other patrons casually mentioned about her. He learned that she lived alone in a small apartment nearby, that she juggled multiple jobs to cover her rent and bills, and that she often spent her free time volunteering at local community centers to help children. Each piece of information made him respect her even more. Here was a woman who had every reason to be exhausted, stressed, or frustrated. Yet she chose to bring warmth and kindness to the people around her. The father realized that it was rare to find someone like her in the world. Wealth and success had shown him many people, some generous, some self-serving, but few with such genuine empathy. Her actions were not calculated or intended to impress anyone. They came from the heart, and he could see how deeply his son had been affected by her kindness. The boy had smiled, laughed, and imagined a world of adventure, something he often struggled to do in public spaces where he felt different or overlooked. The waitress had given him not just a toy, but a sense of recognition, confirmation that he mattered. He thought carefully about what he could do. He did not want to embarrass her, nor did he want her to feel obligated. This had to be genuine, heartfelt. The father understood that sometimes the most meaningful gifts were not measured in money, but in opportunity, respect, and acknowledgement. He decided that he would find a way to express his gratitude in a manner that could genuinely help her life, while also honoring the authenticity of her actions. As he pondered, he remembered how rare it was in his own world to find people who acted purely out of empathy. He had attended countless events, met countless individuals who smiled and nodded politely, who donated generously, or who gave advice. Yet few had the quiet, consistent kindness that he had witnessed in the diner that day. It struck him that life's true value often came not from grand gestures or wealth, but from these small human connections moments where one person truly saw another, acted with compassion, and made the world a slightly better place, determined to act. He began planning a way to approach the waitress. He did not want to scare her with the fact that he was wealthy, nor did he want her to assume that his intentions were transactional. Instead, he thought carefully about what she might need and how he could offer it in a way that respected her dignity and effort. He considered possibilities: a scholarship for further education, financial support for a project she had been working on, or a job opportunity that could give her stability while still allowing her to maintain her independence. Each option was carefully weighed, with the goal of providing meaningful support without imposing or creating discomfort. In the meantime, he returned to the diner occasionally, observing from a distance. He watched as she continued her routine, greeting customers with a smile, managing the lunch rush with grace, and offering small words of encouragement to the children who came in. He noticed the fatigue in her movements at times. He also noticed the light in her eyes when she connected with someone who needed care or attention. She was a woman who gave more than she received, and he admired that deeply. One afternoon, he arrived at the diner when it was quieter than usual. He approached her table where she was on a short break, sipping coffee and jotting down notes. He introduced himself simply, without mention of wealth or status, explaining that he had witnessed her kindness toward his son and that it had touched him profoundly. She looked surprised, unsure at first whether he was serious or just being polite. He explained that he wanted to offer her an opportunity, a way to help her achieve her dreams or gain stability in life. The waitress was hesitant at first, her mind racing with doubt. She had lived most of her life independently, relying on her own effort and resilience. Accepting help from a stranger, someone who clearly had far more resources, felt uncomfortable and unfamiliar. She asked questions, wanting to understand what was being offered and why. The father answered with honesty, telling her that the gesture was meant as gratitude, not as charity. He wanted to honor her kindness, not take advantage of it. Over the next few days, they met again, discussing possibilities and sharing stories. She spoke about her aspirations, her challenges, and her small victories in life. While he listened, genuinely interested, he shared carefully, but only what was necessary to explain how he could help. Slowly, the waitress began to trust him. She saw that his offer was sincere, that he respected her agency, and that this could be a turning point in her life, if she allowed it to be. The father also noticed something else, a change in himself. By observing her, by connecting with someone outside his usual circle, he felt more grounded, more aware of the impact small acts of kindness could have. He realized that wealth and privilege were meaningful only when used thoughtfully, and that human connection, empathy, attention, and care was more valuable than anything money could buy. The waitress's simple act of giving a toy airplane had reminded him of something important, something that often got lost in the rush of life, noticing the people around him and valuing them for who they were. Eventually, the waitress accepted his offer. It was not immediate, and it required trust and courage. but she recognized that this was an opportunity she could not ignore. The father had carefully structured it to empower her, not to create dependence. She would be able to continue working, continue living her life on her own terms, but with support that allowed her to explore her potential fully. In the weeks that followed, a quiet transformation began. The waitress started to see possibilities she had never dared to imagine. She could think about her future without the constant stress of financial strain. She could pursue goals she had shelved for practicality and necessity. And she did so while maintaining the kindness and grace that had first captured the father's attention. The boy continued to enjoy his toy airplane, but now he had a deeper understanding as well. He saw how a small act could ripple outwards, changing lives in ways that were not immediately visible. He understood, even in his young mind, that kindness mattered, and that people who acted with care could create opportunities for others to flourish. The father watched all of this quietly, proud of both his son and the young woman who had made such an impact on their lives. He realized that gratitude could take many forms, and that recognizing someone's value and giving them a chance could be one of the most powerful gifts of all. By the time this part of their story had settled, the diner and the toy airplane had done more than provide a moment of joy. They had set in motion a series of events that would change lives. The father, the son, and the waitress were connected now in a way that went far beyond a single lunch. They were bound by kindness, empathy, and a shared understanding that sometimes the simplest gestures can have the deepest consequences. The young waitress felt a mixture of excitement, apprehension, and disbelief as she considered the opportunity the father had offered her. For years she had worked tirelessly to make ends meet, relying solely on her own effort and determination. Life had been a constant struggle, filled with long hours, small paychecks, and the endless stress of trying to keep everything together. She had dreams, of course, small ambitions she rarely voiced aloud, fearing that they were too far out of reach. But now, someone she had only met a few times, someone who had been moved by her simple act of kindness, was offering her a chance to change her life. At first she hesitated. Accepting help, especially from someone so wealthy and influential, felt foreign. She worried about appearing ungrateful or incapable, about being judged or misunderstood. But after several conversations with the father, she realized that his offer was not about charity or pity. It was about recognizing her effort, her resilience, and her genuine heart. He wanted to provide an opportunity for her to grow, to pursue her dreams, and to gain stability in her life. And slowly, she began to understand that accepting it did not diminish her independence or her strength. Once she agreed, the changes started subtly. The father arranged a meeting with a mentor who could guide her in managing finances, exploring new skills, and planning for her future. At first, she felt overwhelmed by the possibilities. She had spent so long simply surviving that thinking about thriving seemed almost impossible. But with careful guidance, she began to see potential she had never noticed in herself. The mentor encouraged her to pursue her passion for design, a talent she had honed quietly in the background while balancing work and responsibilities. Suddenly, what had once been a dream tucked away in notebooks and sketches became a tangible plan. Meanwhile, the father continued to visit the diner, though he did so quietly, never wanting to intrude on her life. He observed her growth with quiet pride. He watched as she began to walk with a renewed confidence, her posture a little straighter, her smile more relaxed. She still worked diligently at the diner, still greeted every customer with warmth. But now there was a spark in her eyes that hadn't been there before, a spark that came from knowing that someone believed in her potential and had provided the resources to pursue it. The waitress's daily life slowly transformed as she embraced the opportunities being offered. She attended workshops, learned new skills, and began networking with professionals in her field. Each step forward brought both excitement and anxiety. But she persisted, fueled by the encouragement of the father and the growing belief in her own abilities. She began to see that her past struggles, while difficult, had shaped her resilience and creativity. She realized that those experiences, combined with this newfound support, could allow her to create a life she had never imagined. Her relationship with the father evolved as well, built on trust and mutual respect. They met periodically to discuss her progress, share insights, and celebrate achievements. He was careful not to dominate or control her journey. Instead, he provided guidance and support, ensuring she remained in charge of her own life. Through their interactions, she began to understand that generosity could be sincere and unselfish, and that some people truly gave without expecting anything in return. The father's son also played a role in this transformation. He had developed a special bond with the waitress, remembering her as the person who had given him the toy airplane, sparking joy and imagination in his life. He often asked about her day, showing genuine interest and care. The waitress, in turn, grew attached to him, enjoying his curiosity, imagination, and the small moments of laughter they shared. Their connection reminded her of the impact one simple act of kindness could have, and it reinforced her commitment to continue using her talents and energy to help others whenever possible. As the weeks turned into months, the waitress began to see tangible results from the opportunities she had been given. She completed certifications that enhanced her professional skills, allowing her to pursue higher-paying and more fulfilling work. Her confidence grew as she realized that she could navigate challenges successfully with the right support. She also began to plan small projects that reflected her creative passions, envisioning ways to build a sustainable and rewarding career. Beyond professional growth, there were changes in her personal life as well. She felt less stressed, less burdened by the constant worry about bills and survival. She had more time to focus on herself, to nurture her creativity, and to dream bigger than she ever had. Her friendships deepened as she was able to invest more time and energy into meaningful connections. Her family noticed the difference too, commenting on how much more relaxed and hopeful she seemed. For the first time in years, she could truly breathe and imagine a future beyond the limitations of her immediate struggles. The father watched all of this unfold with quiet satisfaction. He understood that true generosity was not about money alone. It was about creating opportunities, empowering others, and allowing them to grow while preserving their dignity and independence. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that his simple act of noticing and rewarding kindness had sparked a transformation that went far beyond what he could have imagined. The diner, which had been the setting for their first encounter, remained a cherished place for all of them. The waitress continued to work there, but now she did so with a renewed sense of purpose and joy. She interacted with customers and coworkers with the same warmth as before, but now her interactions were infused with confidence and optimism. People noticed the change in her demeanor, even if they didn't know the reason behind it. Her colleagues admired her dedication and grace, and the customers appreciated the kindness that had always been part of her character. The young boy's toy airplane, now slightly worn from frequent play, became a symbol of the journey that had begun that day. It reminded him of the power of small gestures and of the people who cared for him. The father, watching the connection between his son and the waitress, felt a profound sense of gratitude and hope. He realized that life's most meaningful moments often come from the simplest acts of kindness, and that the ripple effects of those moments could create profound change in ways that were difficult to predict. The waitress, now on a path towards stability and self-fulfillment, never forgot the act that had sparked this transformation. She continued to pay it forward whenever she could, helping customers, supporting friends, and mentoring children in her community. She understood more than ever that generosity was contagious, and that a single act could ripple out to touch countless lives. As her life continued to improve, she remained humble and grounded, remembering the struggles that had shaped her and the kindness that had altered her path. She realized that her journey was not just about personal success, but about the potential to inspire and assist others, to create moments of joy and opportunity wherever possible. The father had not only given her practical support, but it also reaffirmed her belief in herself and her capacity to make a difference. Over time, the waitress's transformation became evident to everyone around her. She radiated confidence, hope, and a quiet strength that drew people toward her. Her story spread in small ways through conversations, through shared experiences, and through the subtle changes in the diner's atmosphere. People sensed that she had grown, that her life had taken a turn for the better, and that this change was deeply rooted in her character as much as in the support she had received. In the midst of all these changes, the father reflected on the journey they had shared. He realized that the simple act of noticing a child's joy and responding with kindness had created a chain reaction that reached far beyond what he could have imagined. The waitress had grown, his son had flourished, and a new friendship had formed, built on respect, empathy, and shared human experience. It was a reminder that life's most powerful transformations often began with a small, thoughtful gesture. By the end of this chapter in their lives, the waitress had begun to live the life she had always imagined. She was empowered, hopeful, and capable, and she carried with her the lesson that kindness and recognition could open doors that seemed impossible to reach. The father and son continued to be part of her life, not as benefactors or dependents, but as companions and witnesses to the growth that had begun with a simple toy airplane and a quiet act of generosity. The story of her transformation became a testament to the power of empathy, opportunity, and human connection. It illustrated that even the smallest gestures, when noticed and acted upon, could change lives in meaningful and lasting ways. And it reminded everyone involved that hope, kindness, support could create a future filled with possibilities that had once seemed unimaginable. Months had passed since the first encounter in the small diner, yet the memory of that day remained vivid in the father's mind. He remembered the way his son's face had lit up at the sight of the toy airplane, the gentle kindness of the young waitress, and the quiet joy that had filled the diner. What had begun as a small act of generosity had grown into something far greater, an enduring bond that touched the lives of everyone involved. The waitress's life had changed in ways she had never imagined, and now she was living a life of possibility, hope, and purpose. The transformation in her life was remarkable. She no longer felt trapped by financial struggles or limited by the pressures of surviving from paycheck to paycheck. The opportunities the father had provided, mentorship, financial support, and guidance, had allowed her to develop skills, pursue her passions, and envision a future beyond the confines of her previous life. She had enrolled in design workshops, honed her creative talents, and begun working on small projects that reflected her true interests. Her confidence had grown alongside her abilities, and she now carried herself with a quiet assurance that drew people to her. Despite these changes, she remained grounded and humble. She continued to work at the diner, not because she needed the income, but because she loved the environment and the people she interacted with daily. She enjoyed the connection with customers, the friendly banter, and the sense of community that the diner provided. Her presence there now felt different. She carried herself with confidence. Her interactions were enriched by her experiences, and her kindness had a deeper, more deliberate quality. People noticed the change in her, even if they did not know the full story behind it. Her bond with the father and his son had grown stronger over time. They saw each other often, sometimes at the diner, sometimes at small outings in the city, and occasionally at events organized by the father to support other initiatives. The father watched with quiet pride as the waitress flourished, respecting her independence while offering guidance when needed. He admired how she balanced her life, embracing new opportunities without losing the warmth and generosity that had first impressed him. Their relationship was built on trust, mutual respect, and a shared understanding of how small acts of kindness could ripple outward in unexpected ways. The father's son had also grown and flourished. The toy airplane, once a small gesture of kindness, had become a symbol of the possibilities that kindness could create. He often played with it, sometimes alone, and sometimes inventing adventures to share with the waitress, who would encourage him with stories of her own creativity. The boy's imagination had expanded, and he developed a sense of confidence that came from feeling seen, understood, and valued. The connection with the waitress had given him not only joy, but also a subtle, but important lesson in empathy. The understanding that small, thoughtful actions could make a difference in someone else's life. As the months went on, the waitress began to explore her passions beyond the diner. She had started designing small products, creating art pieces, and even assisting local organizations with creative projects. The father's support had given her both the financial stability and the confidence to take risks, she had never dared to take before. Each success, no matter how small, reinforced her belief in herself and her abilities. She had discovered that with the right encouragement and support, she could achieve far more than she had ever imagined. Her family and friends noticed the change as well. She shared her successes, her challenges, and her dreams more openly, and her positivity began to influence those around her. She became a source of inspiration for friends who were struggling, showing them that change was possible, that opportunities could be seized, and that kindness, both given and received, could shape a life in profound ways. The ripple effect of her initial encounter in the diner extended beyond her immediate circumstances, touching those who came into her life and reinforcing the lesson that genuine human connection could be transformative. The father reflected on all that had happened with a sense of deep fulfillment. What had begun as a simple observation of his son's joy had grown into a profound story of empowerment and connection. He understood that true generosity was about more than money or status. It was about seeing the potential in others, offering guidance and opportunity, and allowing them to flourish while respecting their independence. The waitress had taken the chance he had offered, not as charity, but as a platform to build a meaningful and empowered life. In doing so, she had transformed not only her own life, but also the lives of the father and his son. The diner itself had become a place of memories, a symbol of the extraordinary events that had unfolded there. Every time the waitress served a customer or placed a cup of coffee on a table, she was reminded of how far she had come and of the person who had believed in her potential. She carried those lessons into every interaction, infusing her work with empathy, creativity, and a quiet determination to continue improving her life and the lives of those around her. It was a place that represented growth, possibility, and the power of small, intentional actions. The father noticed the subtle ways in which the waitress's life had changed her, perspective and approach to the world. She was still kind, patient, and thoughtful, but now her actions were infused with a sense of confidence and vision. She began mentoring younger staff at the diner, sharing her knowledge and encouraging them to pursue their own dreams. She volunteered at local community events, helping children explore their own creativity, and continued to support her friends and family in practical and meaningful ways. Her life had expanded not just materially, but emotionally and socially, creating a circle of influence that extended far beyond the diner. For the boy, the toy airplane remained a cherished reminder of the kindness that had first sparked this transformation. He continued to play with it, imagining daring adventures and sharing stories with the waitress. He had grown more confident, more open to new experiences, and more aware of the value of empathy. The connection between the three of them, the father, the boy, and the waitress, remained strong. Rooted in shared experiences and mutual respect, it was a bond built on gratitude, kindness, and the understanding that small gestures could create lasting impact. Over time, the waitress's story became a quiet inspiration within her community. People would often remark on her dedication, her creativity, and her generosity, curious about how she had managed to thrive despite previous hardships. She never boasted or sought recognition. Instead, she allowed her actions to speak for themselves. She continued to embody the lessons she had learned: the importance of resilience, the value of empathy, and the transformative power of opportunity. The father felt immense satisfaction in watching her journey unfold. He understood that his initial act, simply noticing a child's joy and responding with kindness, had created a chain reaction that extended far beyond what he could have imagined. It had empowered the waitress, enriched his son's life, and reminded him of the extraordinary impact of small, thoughtful gestures. He reflected on the lesson that wealth and privilege were most meaningful when used to empower others, and that human connection, empathy, and genuine kindness were the truest measures of influence by the end of this chapter in their lives. The waitress had achieved stability, confidence, and a sense of purpose. She had developed a career aligned with her talents and passions, built stronger personal connections, and embraced opportunities that had once seemed unattainable. Her transformation was a testament to the power of kindness, the ripple effects of empathy, and the potential within every individual when given recognition and support, the diner remained a place of significance. A constant reminder of how a single act of kindness could spark profound change. It was a place where stories began, where relationships were formed, and where lives were quietly transformed. The father, the boy, and the waitress often reflected on the journey that had started there, grateful for the simple moments that had led to extraordinary outcomes. The story concluded not with fanfare, but with quiet fulfillment. The waitress continued to thrive, the boy continued to grow, and the father remained committed to supporting acts of kindness and connection wherever he could. Their lives were forever intertwined, bound by gratitude, empathy, and the understanding that even the smallest gestures could create lasting, meaningful change. It was a reminder to all of them that life's most profound transformations often begin with moments of genuine human connection, and that kindness, when noticed and nurtured, has the power to change the course of a life.